Hi there, I'm back again. This is part 2 because we got cut off. I'll wait and see if anybody comes back. And then I'm just going to keep talking. I don't know why we got cut off. There's Tiffany. I love you all so much. I've got the best bunch of people. I absolutely love the people that come on here. Thanks for coming back. So, so you do, what I started to say was that you do not have the right to, and nor would you want to, but you don't have the right to inflict on someone a circumstance or insist that someone do something that you yourself are unwilling to do or have not done or wouldn't do yourself. That's a rule. Plus, it's appropriate. I mean, I agree with it. It's not like, oh, shit, we have to follow this rule, but it's appropriate to do that, right? So we're making these, we're on the position of on the Council of Balance and making decisions for populations that must endure experiences. And we can really only do that having experienced that ourselves. Oh! For heaven's sake!
I have some of it, but I don't have all of it.
Okay, fantastic. I'm so glad you're here. I'm on a live stream right now. So I'm not going to stop to talk to you, even though I really want to see you. Pat your dog. He's hysterical. So I wanted to talk about, hi, honey. Okay, great. Are you here for long?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll see you. I'll pick you up at Hutton Park at 8. I love you extra. Oh, wait, don't drink that. Drink distilled. That has fluoride in it. That's yuck. Right, tell her. Tell her I'm right. They all say don't drink the tap water. What are you doing?
I'm rinsing it out.
Okay. No fluoride, my baby. I don't care, she's 14. No fluoride for you. So, 1 second. I have to catch the stream again. What, honey? Okay, I'll be there. Bye, sweetie. So what we did is come down and go through all that crappy experiences first, because you have to. But that's appropriate because you have to go through it. It's hello. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Sudie. So the Joan, this is the part, finally. This is the part that I started to, mention. In the Joan of Arc lifetime, there were so many things about that had to be installed. As awful as you would say like, why the hell, this is horrible. Why the hell would anybody go down and agree to be nailed to a cross or agree to be, burned alive and public vaginal exams? This is the thing. Why would anybody agree to go through this horrible experience? Because on the one level, we planned it, the group came together and was assembled in the 6th dimension. That's where we gathered and assembled the the energetic construct and assembled the team, because not everybody can go to 12. The 2 of us came down from 12, and then there were other beings that came from all over the place, because we were trying to maximize empathy so that we made alliances. We're trying to speed up the development of empathy by figuring that this was the idea. Bye, honey. The idea was that that one way to do it, we thought, who knew? We've never done it before. It's a bit of a Hail Mary, because there's no way at that point, like, there's no way they're getting out anyway. It's basically a lost cause if we do nothing. So we may as well come up with the best strategy we can come up with and see if we can help them get out. How are you going to do it? And we took all of these, we assembled a group of beings, and we made alliances with with the understanding that it's a free choice planet, and you have to preserve free choice. You have to preserve free choice. So, but they have no spiritual knowledge really yet. Most of them really, 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 really dense, and not enough light is getting in. Light is data, so they're like making the same mistakes, and they're just all doing the same thing over and over and over and over. And it's terrible. So we made alliances with other beings that normally these things don't go together. And bandwidths that don't go together. So we made an energetic construct that's really, really strong, and made alliances with beings that we don't normally go together. And the idea is, in the center, it's really a Merkaba. It's like soup. For real, it's like soup. Everybody puts we basically all take a population that we represent. It's our jurisdiction, and we're going to try to lead out this particular. We're going to be an advocate for this group. And you're going to go down. You're going to have this experience, and you're going to be on a single level. You're going to carry the energy of this entire population. Be responsible for addressing this. And it's really a Merkaba, and there were 2 beings on each point. So it's 3-dimensional. This is a very, very rudimentary version. But basically, you've got all of these different things, and we set up a rotation so that there's a sequence of events, so that everything in here is collective. And basically, it's like black, and we're trying to separate it out into issues, kind of address it on behalf, kind of like we'll be each pair is going to be like the parental figures for this particular issue. And then there's a 3-to-1 ratio between 2 beings here who share a similar issue, and then we balance it, and then there's a rotation so that whatever the experience is, it's going to be. There's a rotation of experiences, so that whatever, but the theory was that if we're all going for maximum yield, if there's a collective idea that we're all going to come together to get as many people out of the planet as possible, out through the 11 gateway, put it that way, through the 11 gateway, and then you take your people, like the dark get the dark side, that the dark people that really don't want to be transmuted, they really prefer it. The dark is going to get their dark people. The light is going to get their light people. And the middle side is kind of like, we're not sure yet. It depends who's going to go where. We don't know. But it's like 50-50. But since they're all going to die anyway, you're going to lose the entire batch. You may as well test it. And the idea in maximizing empathy, maximizing growth, is that there's a circulation so that whatever this side does is going to be felt by every other person in the group. And yeah, that's it actually goes quite in depth. It's a very rudimentary initial foray into this subject, but that's basically the way it's designed to go. And then on each point, there are two beings who balance it. And then my twin he was being the advocate for, or she was being the advocate for the dark, and I was being the advocate for the light. And then the male twin is the advocate for the earth, which could go in either direction. So he's in the center. And then we go round and round and round and round and round. The energy goes around, and then by vibrational drift, according to the preference of each being, they're going to be pulled in one direction or another. That's the way it goes. Yeah. Okay. So regarding and by virtue of their choices too, I would say that, by virtue of their choices. But the sleepers, like if you're talking about the sleepers, we were given leeway, license to work from the fourth dimension to get into the minds of the sleepers who are just mindless, and the only way you can get past their belief barrier, since they don't know even that there's a choice to make, they're just drifting. You get them to sway one way or another by virtue of vibrational drift. So whatever their choices are for entertainment, whatever their choices are for whatever, the bulk of their vibration is going to go one way or another. And that's that. Yeah. So, and then they go into one section or another. And then when they realize that, at some point you go through the 11 gateway and everybody gets their power back and everything is equalized, because to get to go through the 11 gateway, you get imprinted with equality. Like, now it's your job, and there's no more savior figure. Like, we were willing to carry you for a certain distance, but once you get past this period, it's like, this is now your job. And now it's your job. So then there's a whole re-educational system too. There's a re-educating, because we're not going to have any of the old systems that led to the trap formation. At any rate, I still haven't gotten to what I was going to say. Disclosure. So one of the things that in order to get the entire population to lift equally, do you remember I said that even though the way showers are the ones on the leading edge, they took the brunt of the heavy lifting. Like, we went through the most anguish and the really, really heavy ancestral bloodlines and all of that clearing stuff that had to be done. The second wave were kind of in la la land, or like they've given all their power away to external institutions, and they just have. They've been living a life in relative comfort. And you know how you have to go through a certain amount of processing grief in order, the whole awakening experience can be really heavy. The the way most of us are kind of cracked open is to go through some kind of really harsh heartbreak, loss of something, and it's usually more than one thing. And especially those of us who went early, we lost a tremendous amount. There's a certain amount of sacrifice that took place on a certain strata. And we went through, there's a lot of the feeling process, like the darkness has to go somewhere. Sometimes there's this idea that, oh, I cleared it. You know, I used to work with somebody who had this idea that, like, you could just clear, it's very big, it's kind of a spiritually immature idea to think that you can clear, just clear it and it goes. Well, where did it go? If you felt it and transmuted it, then it was, you feel it, but it went and you transmuted, you birthed yourself into a lighter or stronger being. And it was used for something. But it went through a process. You used it for the alchemical cauldron of transformation in that case. And darkness is transmuted through the process of undergoing an experience. But when people say, you know, like, I know that I ring the bell and I will clear negative imprints, but there's a certain level that you can do that, but where does it go? What happens to it is it goes and it becomes somebody else's problem. Like, if you can't deal with something and you don't know what, it's an appropriate way of moving it. But that doesn't mean that it vanishes because you rang a bell. It might vanish from this spot, but I can tell you that from the process, from having been on the Council of Balance, somebody is paying attention, usually one of them, or somebody in a higher dimension, is moving the energy, because it goes to do something. Something happens to it. It doesn't merely vanish. It will change form and it will become something. It could be something productive. But the process of clearing negativity that can be transmuted, it's a process. You have to feel it. So you don't leave that only. It's unfair to expect other people, like some people just have all the negative anguish and other people are just, they get all the fun stuff. Because there's no growth for the people who had, like my friend who's having a very pleasant, overall, very pleasant incarnation. And sometimes you do need that for balance. Absolutely. I'm not saying that it's, and you can get growth that way. Is she going to get a degree of growth from having two very harsh lifetimes and then one light lifetime in the middle? Yeah, she'll get growth that way. So that's totally, you have the freedom to choose that, sure. I'm just saying there's an easier way to, my only point was not to make her choice for her, was just to point out that there's a much easier way to do it with, you can still have growth, but maybe make it less difficult. You can preserve the amount of growth. But maybe she likes extreme, who knows? So I'm not judging it. I just was saying I pointed it out. Those in, I kind of want to say mid-range, like the middle range people who have basically kind of not done a lot of spiritual searching. They're kind of blasé. They're basically like taking public transportation through the whole ascension process. Like they're not really diving too deep. They're basically just taking public transportation and you know, the blue aliens came and gamma waves, but it's not, they haven't really experienced any of the really dark purging. In order to equalize the degree, because we're really coming out of an incredibly dense planet. So you can't leave all of the heavy lifting to just one population. You're going to not get a great harvest. You need the populace at large to feel something and take some actual action on their own behalf. You need that. What that usually takes is a degree of, takes a catalyzing force, which is why we went with the 3-to-1 ratio, I might add. 4 is going to give you structure. It's going to be a very masculine and equidistant stasis, where everything is very stable, but it's stable, so consequently there's no movement. You need the 3-to-1 ratio. 3 is a catalyst. 1 is leadership, right? 1 is leadership and thought, and it's a directive. It's initiative. A 2 is a partnership, and that brings you balance. A 3 is the catalyst for change, because a 3 never stops moving. So a 3-to-1 ratio that I keep talking about, the reason we went with that is because it promotes movement in a direction. The 3 is going to, you're going to get movement out from a 3. It's going to catalyze a change. The 1 is going to determine the direction. Yeah. The 1's going to determine the direction you go in. So you get a change that follows a leader, basically. And then that will take you to a 4. Oh, that brings me back to the crystals for a second. No coincidence. The 4 is when you're going to get a structure, but the change actually takes place at 5. 3 is a catalyst for 5. A change will take place at a 5. So this is one of the interesting things too. And then I'll go back to what I was saying about disclosure for a second. So I had this twin crystal, right? And I didn't recognize this until the other day on my previous transmission. Remember, I've been talking about a 3-to-1 ratio, that pay attention wherever it's not necessarily even a 3-to-1 ratio, but specifically the numbers. Yes, I mean more to that. The numbers 3 and 1 next to each other. A 3 is a catalyst for change. A 1 is going to tell you the direction it's headed, because the 1 is the leadership. So if you have a 1 and a 3, then it's headed off in the direction of the 1. And if you have a 3 and a 1, it's still headed off in the direction of the 1. The 1 is the direction it's headed. The 1 is the leader. So the other day, I was mentioning a 3-to-1 ratio, pay attention to wherever it landed, and I had the 3 Lemurian crystals. And I said, the children are coming. The 3 Lemurian crystals, and then I discovered that they belonged with the same set as this one. What's interesting to me, and I didn't figure this out until I was transcribing until I was writing down, I always make that list of things I covered. I was re-listening to my previous live stream, and then I realized what it was, and I was like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing. So I didn't plan this at all. This is totally synchronicity. This is why you leave things up to God, because things work out this way. 20 years ago, I bought this crystal from Pieces of Mine. And 20 years later, so it had to stay with me in this form for a while before the children crystal come in. But it's from the same set. It's like a reunion of family. It's a family reunion right here. What's interesting to me is that the 3 crystals came in for that live stream. So you have the 3-to-1 ratio. What's fascinating, beautifully designed, not by me. I don't take any credit. Well, maybe it was by me. I don't remember it. No, but it would have taken place. It would have been something like, we're going to do something 20 years ago to have this happen now. And that's what I mean. We keep going back in time to make adjustments so that something else will come in at this juncture to join with this now, because this is the movement that we need to make certain corrections, because there were some errors. We're about 6 years behind schedule, 5, 6 years behind schedule, and we're trying to make adjustments to correct, so you can keep going back in time to make little adjustments, and that's what's being discussed, has been discussed in Legion. I strongly suggest, if you're interested in this, to go watch the series. So you have the three baby crystals, and this, since it's a twin crystal, and check it out, it's locked in one crystal. These do not come apart, and they're locked like in tandem, right? It's almost like an 11. They're locked in that way. So it's simultaneously a 1 and a 2. I think this is absolute genius. I do actually wonder if we were the ones who planted the, I wouldn't surprise me at all if we were the Lemurians who planted the crystals to be gotten now, to be gotten by me 20 years ago, so that I would, reconvene with my own children now. It wouldn't surprise me at all. That would be like a me thing that I would do. At any rate, simultaneously a 1 and a 2. So what does that take us to? You have a 3 to 1 ratio, but it's also a 1. So it takes you to a 3 and a 1 is also a 4. It reduces to a 4, which is structure. But then if you consider this a 2, you would have a 3 and a 2, which would reduce to a 5, which is change, which means it's also a 4 and a 5. So a 4 is about locking in a structure, and a 5 is a change. So you're locking in the change. And it also reduces to a 9 for completion. 4 and 5 is 9. So there's a bit of numerological magic going on, which is pretty freaking sexy if you ask me. You're beautiful. How's that for a dynamic? That is sweet, man. That is really sweet. So back to this. Time travel and disclosure. We know that there are a whole bunch of children on the planet being trafficked, and I want to come covering up my crystal, and you just close your ears for this part. Being trafficked, and there's a lot of pedophilia and sex slavery and children being sacrificed, etc. Not you. You're all saved. You're staying with me. So what we did to, the question becomes, how do you get them out? Someone has to undergo, you can say it would be easy to, okay, I should back up. A little bit of Joan of Arc history. For those of you who don't know, there was a war between England and France, but it was going on for 100 years, 80 years when Joan of Arc got there. One of the aspects of that lifetime was that there was a subjugation of women. Significant. And the issue of the Joan of Arc's virginity, there was a prophecy leading up to Joan of Arc's arrival on the scene in France at that time. And the prophecy was known by the populace at large. The prophecy was, France will be ruined by a woman and saved by a virgin. We planted the prophecy so that because we're trying to get into the minds of the sleeping people. Because getting past the belief barrier is one of the single hardest things to do, because there's free choice and they're so incredibly dense and no light gets in. So you try to get past the resistance of their minds, because usually there's just this offhand rejection of new ideas, new anything. So you couch it in a way. You try to find the path of least resistance. You couch it in such a way that it's a story or it's a prophecy, or it mingles with their belief system a little bit, so that it begins to percolate, so that they have an idea, and it just starts to soften their resistance to certain ideas, because you put it in the form of a story. Very similar to the way Star Wars came on the scene. It's like nobody had ever heard of these ideas, aliens, and you couch it in the way it's like it's just a story, or like Harry Potter too, like magic in schools. People will go along with it if it's entertainment and they think it's not real. So you just have to get their imaginations going a little bit. You start to tap, hey, your imagination. Start to think about this, and just get them to relax around the idea a little. So we put the prophecy in place so that when Joan of Arc arrived on the scene and kind of makes an entrance, it's very unusual. You're trying to start women's liberation, right? Women's equality, so that you can go through the 11 gateway, which is now, you got 600 years. That's not a lot of time the way things are going. They're not moving very far. They don't move fast. They really don't move fast. You're trying to boost boost it a little, make it contagious. Get some flow. So one of the ways to do that energetically is you try to make somebody who really draws a lot of attention, because what the attention will do is anytime you look on, this, energy goes where attention flows. So you get somebody, you create someone like a celebrity or a child star or a king or some kind of strong, something that grabs the attention. At that time, it was a girl in pants. Who fulfills the prophecy? You set them up we're trying to set them up for success, right? One moment, please. No, I'm not going to do this right now. You're going to have to wait. I should have taken the time during the break to feed you. Go lie down. I'll feed you one moment. Wait. Go lie down. You wait too. You're lurking. No, I'm talking. You're just going to have to wait. Otherwise, I'll have to go feed him because I'm a sucker and he's claiming he hasn't eaten. He hasn't eaten. You wait a little bit before. I'll give you a little bit more in a minute. Just a second. Wait. I should go feed him. It's 40 minutes past supper time is what he says. And he's correct. It is. 42 minutes. It's true. Damn, dog food's in the car. It's going to have to be, no, go lie down. You're just going to have to wait. Because I don't want to take that long. I'm going to finish talking first. Go lie down. So one of the things you do, thank you. I appreciate your patience. I forgot to bring it in. If it was just in the cupboard, I would feed you now, but it's not in the cupboard. It's all the way in the car, so you're going to have to wait. So you create a star, and or someone really who's going to capture the minds of the population, and you get a lot of people talking about it. You get a lot of people looking at Joan of Arc, and what that does is it starts to create these energetic connections. And every time and David Wilcock talks a lot about this too. If you go to Wisdom Teachings on Gaia TV, I think like the first or second season, something like that, he talks a lot about energetic structures that are created by way of attention. And when you can remove the actual structure, and until the energy is changed, it's going to remain, because you've got the whole idea of inertia. It changes until it remains until it is changed. So what we did is we created this energetic structure. Like basically what I mean is, like, if you have if you were to remove the pyramids right now, the energetic structure has been there long enough that the pyramid itself would remain in energetic form. You could, in theory, you could take all of the actual substance, the material away, and you'd still have the energetic. The energy of it is so strong at this point that it's basically permanent, and you would have to do something to address it on an energetic level, which would be a whale of a task. So Joan of Arc only lived for, I don't know, I was on the scene in public for like 2 years or something. It was very short but extremely intense. But then what we did, once you gain a lot of that that energy flow into going into the construct, you just keep it going. You keep the stories, you keep the movies, you keep the whole thing, the trial, there's a humongous story component in the energetic construct through history. All of these lifetimes had enormous, very deliberately, enormous story written components, stories that are repeated, like holidays where you repeat the story, where you keep, the whole idea was to keep the energy alive, like we're still trying to get as many people as possible through the 11 gateway, held by us until we're on the other side of the gateway, in which case everybody, it's all equal. You guys, it's like, oh, we're done. We're out of here, man. You guys take it. And now it's the new education. But we're not just there yet, yeah? We're not there yet. So I'm just telling you about what happened. Once you get, so like yeah, I think I was only on the scene for roughly 2 years, something like that. But in that time, all you have to do is get the child star or the celebrity aspect in the public eye. You just galvanize that and, what's the word I'm looking for there? Initiate that, spark it, for no pun intended. But basically spark something like that. And then you just keep it going. But one of the issues that we did one of the issues was that of Joan of Arc's virginity, specifically. It suited the time because there was this whole aspect of the Virgin Mary and women being pure, and Joan of Arc was the virgin who was a very strong proponent for like the light side in theory, right? It's basically two sides of the same thing anyway. It's basically two sides of the same coin. So it's gonna have the view. It's going to have the meaning that you give it. And my real goal here, because God knows I don't want the identity. I need to, how do I say that? Integrate. I had to fully integrate that aspect of myself because there was such a tremendous amount of trauma, a real division. Rejection of self, let me put it that way. Yes, rejection of self. That whole aspect of myself, I never wanted to go there ever again. And who blames me, right? But it's going to have the focus. It's really important to choose your focus about, and for me too, to choose my focus about how to look at that entire experience, because the sheer importance, the conflict, the conflict over Joan of Arc's virginity was such an issue for divide that the entire war, which was they were fighting over this 80 years of war in the Loire Valley before Joan of Arc arrived on the scene. But if there was one issue that let me rephrase that, because it was all about who owned, the title, who claimed the title. And it really there's an energetic component in there about women's bodies and women's power and sex, who owns women's bodies. And I don't know how to say this. This is going to be, I'm going to wind up clarifying it better. This is the first time I've really talked about it. And I still have yet to talk about disclosure and why it was an issue. Or it is an issue, and it's important to talk about it now, which is why I'm doing it now. Because it's very easy in the third dimension to look at a circumstance and say, that was terrible. That was terrible. That should never happen. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. And the experience is horrible. And I'm not saying ever that the experience is good, particularly because I lived through it and it was horrible, and I know that. The issue of Joan of Arc's virginity was such a bone of contention, such a sticking point, such a prize, like something to be warred over. And you had two countries already warring for 80 years. And Joan of Arc became this mascot for France, which was dying like inches away from total annihilation. Who came on the scene and like, ta-da, we're going to save you. I'm going to help you save your country. And there was this thing about Joan of Arc's virginity that it was considered at that time to have this supernatural power of purity. Yeah, that's how I wanted to say it. It was considered and you have to think about the way the belief system was. It was the Middle Ages. And they really believed this with all their mind, that like they're the only way you could get any reverence for women at all was to go through like the Virgin Mary as an icon, who was considered, a virgin, pure. So you have to go in that way. You have to have one person who embodies these characteristics. So they wanted something tangible. Because it was a very time of physical dependency. They weren't yet they were still going through Christ, so they still are going through an intermediary. And there were a whole bunch of considerations where the only way you could do this was to have a tangible representation of the Virgin Mary, but it had to be like, you can't be a woman either. It had to be, because they were considered corrupt. You couldn't do that either. They were still considered the enemy. So like a child, like divine child that happened to be, so basically we have this strategy where Joan of Arc is going to come down. It's going to be a female child, but you can get in to the minds of some really twisted characters, because you're trying to take it back toward being upright and fair. So there was a war over Joan of Arc's virginity. Became like this hyper saturated symbol where the French believed that Joan of Arc had this, like, the power, was blessed by the power of God, because I said so, carries the power of God. And they thought that as long, and in a way it's true. It's no longer true, but it was true then. Because it was all about that as long as I remained a virgin, it would work. So the reason, so like the modern person will look at that and say, well, that's absurd. Why can't you have sex? Women's rights, and they, we have sexual freedom. We can do whatever we want. It has nothing to do with that. But that's really not what it had to do with, really. It has nothing to do with a hymen being damaged or not. It has to do with personal sovereignty. It has to do with authenticity and purity of self-sovereignty, and being unmolested by any external influence. So also, that if you don't know this, the vaginal canal is where light codes are transmitted. Ancestral patterns are transmitted to babies when they come out the vaginal canal. They don't have their ancestral patterns until they are birthed, and it's the passage of the squeezing. It's like the alchemical cauldron. When they're squeezed through the birth canal, that's when they pick up all of the ancestral codes. And the same is true with anything that is involved in the vaginal canal. Whether it's a baby or a penis, you're getting, there's a transmission of codes. So if it's a penis, you're getting their codes too. So you have to be real careful who you sleep with. And you're getting information from their ancestry and their whatever. It may not be as without consequences you think. It's meant to be a sacred creative act. So if you're having casual sex with a lot of people, that's going to be in a realm that keeps you lower. There's a sacred partnership that happens through the 11th gateway, which is no nonsense at all. And past that, there's a reason you've got these divine unions. It's not that you can't have sex with other people, but there's a sacred creative space. And I'm not saying it has to be the same person, but there's a sacred creative space. So anyway, I'm just saying that there's sacred sexuality, which does something. So the whole idea of not being penetrated by anything external that is undesired, that I am my own being and I will not be molested and I will not be corrupted by any external force. I am my own. And if I will allow you in, I will allow in only my equal of my choosing. Because I will tell you that rape was so commonplace. It was such an everyday occurrence that there was no longer, this is true of France altogether at the time, they had reached a point of such defeat that there was no longer any resistance to it, which was the problem. There was just, it's like they had no will left to fight. They had been beaten down to such a degree that for 80 years of loss, that of the English, who were much bigger and stronger, coming in, raiding villages, killing people, killing men, stealing children, raping all of the women, burning, stealing the livestock, killing the livestock, burning all of the crops, burning houses, and leaving. Marauders. It's like every day you just had marauders were just commonplace. Can you imagine living like that for 80 years? It's similar to the way certain corporations are doing that to certain populations in this country, which is why you have, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, you think? But there's a certain kind of, when you've been beaten down for generations, it's like, why bother? We had fight at the beginning, but we're at this point, there's like wet tissue paper. You have nothing left. Such was the case in France at that time. They had no more resources. They needed fresh influx. So the Joan of Arc virginity, there was the French needed very much a belief and an inspiration that something was possible, a miracle was possible, and it needed to be something that was like an external source because they didn't have anything internally at the time. So you land something there that is like this shining thing, like, ta-da, you know, come on, I'm going to rouse you to your own empowerment. And they needed to believe that Joan of Arc, and to a degree, it was true. And it still is to a degree. It's not really about the hymen. It's about the principle of sovereignty. That you don't have the right to rape me. And I make my own decisions. There was that, and that remains. The English had the luxury, not a luxury. They were basically, I should say it this way, every force evolves a form. And if you are in a situation where there's just it's just a degree of imbalance, you have to, the way to find forgiveness and to find a way forward is to recognize that the weak force, quote unquote weak force, that is offering no resistance, if you're over here on this side, you can't even blame the English at that point, because if they don't meet any resistance, it has to keep going. Nature abhors a vacuum. So establish your boundary if you don't want to be invaded. They needed rescue at that point because they had no way of establishing a boundary. They were too tired, they were too weak, they were too defeated, and they had nothing left. So they had to have another influx to come in to help them do that job. So it took somebody with a very strong energetic boundary around this issue that said, I'm going to carry in an energy of such barrier to being penetrated and invaded, hence the virginity. See? You will not penetrate me. You will not get past this point. And you don't even have to fight that way. You can just stand there and be, although we did fight, because they actually did need to learn to do that kind of a skill. Say no. You have to say no. Nobody's going to, they can't read your mind. You've got to say no. And you have to mean it. And you have to not be a people pleaser, like, oh, no, it's just, I hope they get it. Don't do that. Say no firmly and kindly and mean it, and that's the end of that. But the English at that time had this idea that, because they also had the same belief system, right? The belief in virginity, and they see, they're this far away from taking France and then having, putting the English king on the throne of France, and then they have France too, and then France is annihilated, totally defeated, never to return. They were minutes away from getting an English king. So Joan of Arc comes on the scene, and the English thought that if the saving influence is the virginity aspect of this person, this mascot who's a girl general, if we can rape her, we can defeat France. It's not only a matter of the battles, it's a matter of like, if we can just get her raped, find a way to rape her, and the first, if she's raped, we win. But it's a matter of the country's defense. So it's funny to me that now we're in this time and we're still dealing with the same fucking issue. No pun intended. It's the same issue. in many ways, this is a totally different discussion that I might go into later, but in many ways, Trump is actually in the, he has the same role that Joan of Arc had. It's a different time, but it's the same role. Massive catalyst for change, massive catalyst to get people up and fighting for their own belief system, whatever it is. Let's put up this wall. And whatever side of the issue you're on, you're upset and your emotions are going, so you're at least fighting for your own, because the problem that we're having is a tremendous complacency. Like, I don't care. I'm gonna go back to sleep now. Somebody else will take care of it. You can't have that in a creative realm like 5. So basically, if you're still asleep, you're not going to 5. You're going to go back. So our job is to maximize the harvest. Not just get as many people up and awake and have a belief system, then you can be an advocate for yourself and an advocate for others. You have to be able to face conflict without falling back and people pleasing and just avoiding any conflict to such a degree that you can't say no. You have to be able to look someone in the face and say, this is what it is. This is what it is. We're dealing with X, Y, Z, and this is where I stand on the issue. And have that just be okay, a discussion. This is how you have a calm discussion without flipping out and going to a major flinch because you have to say something that someone else might disagree with. It's just a skill that you have to learn. So you have to be able to say no without an overcorrection, because a lot of times, I didn't like that, sorry. Sometimes there's very often when somebody is afraid to say no, there's an overcorrection at the beginning, especially because they can't just hold themselves upright and say, no, not doing that. There's usually, like, I remember I used to have to do this with my mother when I was in high school, because I didn't feel like I had any way to say no at all. It was just going to happen anyway. So in order for me to say no, I would have to like gear up a whole bunch of strength and then just kind of like lunge at it and go, no, or just like, I would avoid at that time. Like try to keep peace by not dealing with it. And then I would just like say something and run away, because I had no way of, I was not strong enough at that time in high school to simply hold myself steady with my own conviction and say, this is the way it is. Because what I expected, and it would have happened, was that I would get this incessant argument that would never leave. She would, just forcefully come at me until I yielded. And then if I, like, doors would be knocked over, stuff would be thrown, whatever, it would be terrible. So you learn to keep the peace because it's a survival mechanism at that time. But so the English thought that if they could rape Joan of Arc, they would win the war. And then the English, then the French felt that their victory depended not only on winning the battle, but on her preservation of virginity. So what they did, and this finally brings me to disclosure. I know you're still waiting for your food. Wait, more, you have to wait. Sorry. I think I'll try and feed you at 7 o'clock. Please wait. No, go lay down. I know you're starving. A little bit more. No, go lay down. Who's listening? So finally, this will be basically the last. How do I know what it's going to be? Something else can come in. Sorry. The whole issue of disclosure. And why did this happen at that time? There's a way to look at everything. So even for the country I was fighting for and an advocate of and the mascot of and the figurehead of, even after, before and after, King Charles got the crown at the Battle of Orleans, Joan of Arc was, I should say there were public vaginal exams to determine and repeat, public vaginal exams every time I was moved, because there was this idea that I might have been harmed when I was passed from person to person, place to place. This was true also after, like, the English captured me even. Every time I was moved, there was this idea like, oh, we're going to take her from this spot and you're going to move here today. You're going to be held in this other place for like 2 weeks or a couple of months. And we just have to make sure that your virginity is still intact. So they would bring, usually there was a woman, there would be like groups of people there. And one time, like, I knew perfectly well that there was a clergy hiding in the cupboard, a huge armoire, and there's a man in, I don't know why everybody else was standing around, but he didn't want to know, he didn't want anybody to know. It's weird. Anyway, the whole idea of public vaginal exams, very awkward, really uncomfortable. So it's tempting to look at that experience at that time from our perspective in this time and say, and also from that time, because it was uncomfortable, real, and it did leave me with trauma in this lifetime. I didn't have a gynecological exam until I was pregnant, and the reason I didn't, you know, you're supposed to have probably TMI, I'm just gonna tell you this anyway, I avoided having any gynecological exam in this lifetime. Whew. As I was afraid that I was going to start crying and never stop. So I just avoided it and never went. And they would, you know, say, like, at college, when was the time of your last pap smear? And I would lie, or I would just avoid it completely. Just couldn't go near it. And I said that I had them, but I'd never actually had one. The first time I ever had any gynecological exam was when I was actually pregnant. And the weird thing was, when it was an examination for pregnancy, when I already knew I was pregnant. And once it was a pregnancy exam, I had absolutely no fear whatsoever. I went from somebody who would cry and burst into tears at the very idea of going to having absolutely no fear at all, not even a shred of discomfort. It was only when when it was a pregnancy exam, I was fine. Because then it was about being pregnant. I already knew I was pregnant. And then it wasn't an issue. It was only the idea of not being pregnant and we're just going to check you. It was that whole thing. And it's very easy. So here's the thing. It's very easy to say, well, why would you put yourself through that? Knowing that we planned these lifetimes in advance, knowing the trauma that would take place later, knowing the effect it would have on me, because all lifetimes are concurrent. You can go up and plan these lifetimes and say, well, there's a shit ton of trauma right here. It's going to cause this and this and this and this. You can clearly see when you're above it where the trauma lies, what the effects of it are. It is. So when you're on the Council of Balance, you can see all of basically history on a board that's like anything from chess to static on a television. Some places it's all even and it looks more like static, and some places are really dark and really light, very heightened and very, very intense, purely one thing or another. And what we're trying to do is balance it so it's softer, so we can get more movement, so that it's more equally distributed, with certain exceptions, certain punctuation points where you need to get a larger degree of growth at certain punctuations in history where you have the opportunity to make a much larger leap forward, and you have to. Like the 100 Years' War, you can't have that anymore. Like, this has gone too far. We need to address this right here. I think, you know, and there will be a consensus. I think if we address this here, what's it going to do to, you know, we all take the a lot of discussion goes on over, you know, how it's going to affect all parties. And we try to be an advocate with the understanding, this is on the Council of Balance, with the understanding that we are all after the same aim. For real. Like on the Council of Balance, we're all trying for balance. It's not one thing like the dark's going to be happy if they win. The dark takes that perspective, and we take the light perspective, and we work in tandem to try and solve a mutual problem, because the problem is severe. So why would you choose? So strategically, looking at the issue of Joan of Arc virginity, knowing that trauma, it's going to leave me, and I'm going to have to get out of it too, because I still have to get out the 11 gateway too. And then there's karmic influences for all parties involved. You know, you have to see, what is this going to do everywhere? Who's it going to take down? Who's going to go up? Who's going to have a harder time? Who's going to be able to recover? If this person endures a certain degree of trauma, are they going to be able, is it recoverable? Are they going to be able to recover by the time, is it survivable? Is really the question. And it's not like you did this for humanity so you get a free pass. It's like you take on karma. You still have to take responsibility for dealing with the issues. And it's severe. It's really severe. So how do you solve it? And then it becomes your job to do that. It's not something you can avoid. You want to. We all try that. We do. We all try that. But so strategically, why do you think we would do something like that? Apart from the fact that we had to get into the mind of the populace, but there's another advantage that you have to be aware of, because that's the way it affected the Middle Ages, for the mindset of the Middle Ages, for what happened, for what had to happen during the Middle Ages. But then like time's a spiral, so there's the issue of the Joan of Arc lifetime, and then a level up, you know, because it's spiraling and it's expanding, right? It's expanding. It's like a roll of cellophane, and every single time there's an expansion. So if you picture a roll with let's say there's a core event, and it solidifies into like a big chunk of gravel, like a granite chunk that leaves like a bump. Think of a roll of cellophane, and on one level in the middle is like this, it's like a big rock, a certain degree of trauma that's really dense, and you're still dealing with it. Years and years and years go by. Remember I said it's like a spiral, and something that starts here is now this big by the time it gets up here. So you think of the Middle Ages and the Joan of Arc public virginity exams, or the whole issue of the Joan of Arc lifetime, and 600 years later, extremely contagious energy, because we did that on purpose. It has expanded, and tons of time has passed. And it also spread throughout the globe in a number of different ways that I'll talk about at a different time. Every time you add a layer of cellophane onto a rock, it gets a little softer, but there's like a different layer of understanding. It does something different. Remember I was talking about the strata? in the whole toroidal field around the earth, there are different strata of development, different strata of and time. So as you develop, a core event in the Middle Ages will cause something, will have caused an effect. So we strategized that public vaginal exams on a private level of Joan of Arc, whose pattern, that template, is going to be picked up by millions of people. That my guides told me one time that my goal for the Joan of Arc lifetime was to incarnate into that vessel, that body, turn on the garden hose and leave it running, so that by the time of the ascension window, it would have saturated the earth to the degree that was necessary, and we could plant something into the parched earth, because it was now fertile and ripe for the new garden to grow, basically. So public vaginal exams of Joan of Arc's virginity specifically, and particularly go back and look at The Messenger if you're not familiar with the story. It was the church that did this too. It was not just the royal court. It was the church. It was the institutions. The institutions, the church institution, the governmental institutions, and the whole idea of her being a child star, this galvanizing force, this massive identity that had just had such a potent kind of explosive, mesmerizing effect on the people of the world. So public vaginal exams by institutions of a single person, it caught on, and by the time, if that's at the core, if that's the core event, by the time you get up through all of these layers of spiritual maturity and time, and the population is growing in their understanding, but it's going off in two directions, because we've been in the third dimension, which is a time of heightened polarity. This is a place of heightened polarity. So you're going to get, it's going to move in two directions as it goes up, because we're trying to break apart the incredible density, and it has to go in two directions. So it's going to go very strongly toward the light, and it's going to go very strongly toward the dark, with a certain amount in the middle, but the whole goal is to separate, is to create a divide so that we can break the systems that are basically keeping us trapped. So what you have is traumatized children held within a system. So that takes us to disclosure. The issue was asked, every single public vaginal exam, the whole thing was, has this person been raped or not? Have they been molested or not? Has this child star, this child who was held in custody, have they been molested or not? So it kind of flips the whole thing. Like, you'd think that a public vaginal exam of Joan of Arc is horrible on the one side. You can take correctly the viewpoint that that's terrible, to take a person and move them from spot to spot and have them endure such terrible trauma, lingering trauma that's passed on through generations, that to 600 years later, this poor soul, me, is still carrying around the trauma from this ancestral experience of mine, past life experience. On one side, that looks really, really terrible, and the trauma was real. And on the other side, is it worth it when at this level, what did it do? It's the same event. You're just looking at it from at a different level. Institutions who were holding children and torturing children and raping children. It provides for the same thing on this level. We are asking the question in public, has this child been held? Has this child been molested? Has this child been raped? Who's accountable? And the war is going to be won or lost depending on whether they remain pure or not. Who fucked with them? It better be no one. And we're going to make sure, and we're going to do it in a public forum. We're going to hold the institutions accountable. Was it worth it to go through that personal experience now so that we get disclosure and the breakdown of public institutions to hold them accountable for the torture and the imprisonment of sexually abused children? Absolutely. Also sexually trafficked children, because they moved me. They kept moving me around. It's like what I've gone back, I've said this before, but every single thing that happened during the Joan of Arc lifetime created this oil spill effect where it just went everywhere. Every single aspect just picked up this generative thing where it literally it set up the duality. It planted the seeds to create a domineering system where on one hand it took a lot of people went into darkness with it, and it did create like child stars being abused in Hollywood. It had to go that dark so that it could also go that light, so that we could get just the darkest part out and transmute the entire middle range. There's a strategy to it. We're not done yet either. We're mid-process. So there's still a great deal of work to be done here. The darkest dark will not be coming to 5. They're not coming. They're not transmutable, and they're going to go and stay in 3. In the Joan of Arc lifetime, the Dauphin that I won the crown of Orleans, the power when we took the city of Orleans, and Pate and all those all the other military victories there, that won Charles VI, that gave him the power. It was creating a circumstance where we mistakenly give our power to someone external, even though we ourselves are the more spiritually aware. There was, he was my counterpart in that lifetime. Very much an agent of darkness, but it had to be that way. So you'd think that like when Archangel Michael comes down and I have that big vision that says, go give the crown to, or go win France for, and give the power, make sure that the Dauphin gets the crown. And then we did that. But it's very interesting because the first meeting, our very first meeting, it took me quite a while to reach him as well. Really, it wasn't like you could just go. I mean, I had to spend like almost really a long time, like almost 2 years, waiting for somebody to help me get to him. And I was like tending bar. I was working at a tavern, and I was just working, waiting to, can somebody help? I was talking about it the whole time. This is what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go get, And then in our first meeting, that famous meeting that has, kind of iconic, historical, so much has been made about the first time when Joan of Arc met the king, when she went to court. And everybody was standing around, and I'm finally there. In honesty and service. In honesty and service and determination, I showed up authentic and real in service. And his first interaction with me was a lie. It was a deception. I did recognize him. There was a big thing, like, because what he did was they knew, they had heard that I was coming, so they decided to test me with a trick. There was, he put somebody else in his place, and they lied to me first thing. So whatever energetic platform you step forward on is going to dictate the result you get. I stepped forward honestly. He stepped forward with deception. He's very good-natured and he's extremely charming. He really is. He really is. I was married to him in this lifetime too. And he really is incredibly good sense of humor. Very much an enjoyable persona, but very fearful on the interior, which I had a tremendous amount of compassion. Also, but a good match for me in a lot of ways, because very easily, very open and absorbent on the top end, incredibly intuitive. You wouldn't think so, but it's true. Remember how I said that dark and light forces will look for an open venue that can be easily entered. And I was very, very open, still am, same person, very open on the top end to, incredibly intuitive. And also in the energetic construct. So I'm hearing all these voices all the time, always getting messages and multiple languages going on simultaneously. But what they did was, at the time, my first meeting with King Charles, who wasn't King Charles, he was the Dauphin. And they said to someone else, you step forward, you pretend, let's just tell her that, that you're the king instead, that it's you're the Dauphin. And we'll watch. So you've got all these people standing around watching this person show up. And it was an intimidating space too. It was a public space. And I'm in like everyday clothes. Basically, not exactly a peasant. I was actually more like middle class. But I've never been any place like that before. Wasn't exactly met with kindness, was met with a certain amount of not open mocking, but disdain. There's definitely that. And I could tell it wasn't him because the light wasn't right. There's actually, I had it more than light language, where I will get what I call, I refer to them as affirmatives. So very often when I'm speaking to people, the energy adjuster I can get, there will be flashes of light that have different qualities: soft light, harsh light, whiter or softer, or and when people speak, sometimes if something is important and I need to remember it for later, or I'm gonna want to remember something because it's going to relate to something later on, there will be a flash of light when somebody says that word. Or sometimes I'll be in passing and I'll see certain things light up, and it's often it's like, remember this because these pieces of information are going to be important later on. You're going to need to remember this, or remember what this person said. So it's like flashes of light speak a language on top of the person's verbal language, on top of the symbolic language that, like I always say, every force evolves a form. So forms carry information as well. And that's its own other kind of language. But then there's light language, and I could read energetic imprints, and his the person that they said was the Dauphin wasn't, because he wasn't lit. He wasn't lit up. But there were two people there actually who were lit up. And it's a certain energetic signature that I knew to look for. And the two people who were lit up, one was the Dauphin and one was his cousin. I think it was his cousin. It was some blood relative. So basically it's the same energy. And one was slightly different, the authentic one, but that it's very similar. But I could tell them apart. Like I remember pausing in front of, like they had all these people milling around, and the person that they told me was a Dauphin. I'm like, he was totally just not it. It was just like, it looked inert. It was like there's nothing there. And I'm like glancing around the room, and there were, as I'm looking for people, because I like kind of feel that something's there. It's like, I know it's around here somewhere. So you're kind of scanning the crowd, and then one person does have light about them. Like, so I remember I had paused in front of his cousin, and for a minute I thought that, like, okay, maybe it's you, because a lot of things are matching. And then kept looking, and but then there was like one that was brighter, and it's like, oh no, it's you. It's you. And it was. One moment. I know you're still hungry. I've got to go feed this dog. At any rate, so basically the whole issue of disclosure is going to be about showing us the evidence publicly. We want the institutions to, it's useful. Like on one hand, it's bad, but you would call it bad if you were still in the strata that considers something right or wrong, of duality, where you have to choose whether something is right or wrong, because you have this idea. It's either right or it's wrong. But then the way we can really get to find peace, you find peace this way. Because with spiritual maturity, you recognize that there was really a reason for that was not clear initially. You find a lot of forgiveness this way. I remember it just comes with spiritual maturity. It's like, I remember one time I was taking a bath when I was 5, and we'd run out of hot water, and I was freezing cold. And my mother had gone downstairs to boil a kettle of water to warm up my tub, because we were just out of hot water. And she went down to get it, and I was sitting in the tub shivering, and I was really, really cold. And when she walked into the bathroom, I asked her to pour some on my back, and she didn't. And I remember getting really mad at her, like genuinely, like I thought I was really cross, and I was like, you're not listening to me. And I thought she didn't understand that I was actually cold, and I was cold, and I did need to be warmed up. And I did want something hot on my back. And was she right not to do, yes, of course she was right. It would have caused me severe damage. And it wasn't until I grew up and had a different perspective on that event that I realized that, and still thinking about it, like I remember that time when my mother wouldn't pour hot water on my back, that, oh, I see why she didn't do that now. From a place of spiritual maturity. There's something else that you don't know yet. A little later on, it's going to become clear. So the whole purpose of delivering this information is that there are lots of things that are going to come out to the public at large that I would ask that you remain open-minded about, because there are often certain things which seem like they could be non-negotiably horrible. How could a public vaginal exam of this innocent child possibly, for an example, How could holding children in, and you know that I'm a huge fan, if you watch my information, you know that like children in prison, children being held, kept away from their parents, huge trigger for me. Not a big fan. Is it serving a purpose? Yes. I know that too. The entire planet wasn't going to get out. So you have to look at issues of triage and how you can get the majority of people out. It's a spiritual war. There are some casualties. We are trying to protect the children. I give you my word of honor. We are trying to protect all parties. All of us are children too. And a lot of the beings of all kinds who come down to liberate planet Earth, many of our greatest spiritual warriors have come down in the bodies of children. I'm not saying that their suffering is not real. Of course it is. We're getting everyone out as soon as we can. All I'm saying is if you listen to the news at all, if you choose to participate, if you're still in the strata that's involved in listening to the news, getting involved in political debate, all of these levels are necessary. So you can't bypass and jump and say, okay, I'm just not going to do it. It's not a judgment, but it is a measurement. So everybody is going to be measured to the degree to see basically what you're made of. Your first creation is yourself. So try to walk in question, cultivate a state of consistent inquiries where you can go about the experiences of your life, whatever you're doing, and this is what I do. Ask yourself this question, because I can have an irate response. I love that shit sometimes. Somebody just kind of get off on that. I don't mind it. I don't mind a good argument. There's a good argument that's productive. If you're arguing and having a big reaction, it's one of those things, it's like it really depends, because sometimes you can have a big reaction to something and it's productive because it's a purge, and then you restabilize yourself. That's very productive. We need that. At the lower level, we need as much purging as to go on as possible. That's why it's like arguing isn't necessarily bad. Conflict isn't necessarily bad. During the time of purging, there's nothing else you can do but engage in that process to go through the alchemical process of transformation so that you can eventually have peace. But you can't bypass it and say, I'm going to pretend to remain or hide my reaction so that everything seems peaceful, and then I'm just going to keep everything under this level of compression so that we never get an explosion. You need the volcano to erupt so that it can calm down in a place of health. It's like draining a massive global abscess. So when you walk through the experiences of your life, and certain things are exploding possibly even all around you, because we're in that kind of time. You know, school shootings and explosive political agendas. It's helpful on a personal development level to ask yourself, what would happen? Is there another way to see this? I'm not saying to twist the facts to make it seem okay. That's not it. That's not it. What I'm saying is find a way, just walk in inquiry and say, how can I get out of judgment? Judgment is not helpful. You can still have a strong opinion. I struggled with that for a while. And I kept saying, like, how strong can my opinion be? How strong can my preference be before it becomes a real strong judgment? Like, I can really waver on that line. Because I got some pretty strong opinions. And I don't want to let them go. I want to hold on to my strong opinions. I think you can have a very strong opinion and still remain in a state of non-judgment that allows freedom for all parties, because you really do have to remember that somebody else's viewpoint, they need that to be where it's appropriate for that level. Not everybody fits the same size anything. And if you nail yourself down to something that is too rigid or doesn't allow for growth, you're stewed in the water. It doesn't allow for growth. You have to allow it to be flexible. That doesn't mean that you don't maintain something firmly when it matters. I guess that one of the things, it's going to lock you into whatever level it's at. Is that true? I think that is true. I'm going to look at that more carefully though later. I'm trying to say, so if you lock yourself into, so there are all these different strata with different belief systems. As you go up, your belief changes. And I guess whatever you are really, really firmly adhered to, if you adhere, no, it would have to, wait, it would have to lock you, is that true? It would have to lock you in 3, because that's the only place where the actual lockdown exists. But you could, okay, so you could maintain a, I'm just asking myself this question. You could go up the strata and maintain, you could maintain a North Star. You can do that. Like, you can maintain your connection to your higher self and only follow that, I'm only following that. Like, you could get really adhered to that, I think, and still make it all the way through. Because if you're down here where there's rigid mindset, and let's say your higher self is all the way up here in a much higher vibration, that's something you could use. You could, that's the one thing I think that you could probably adhere to the entire way up and still ascend. I'm going to look at that though. I'm always asking myself that question. Is there a way to get out of it? I'm always asking myself, if I think something is true, what's the opposite? Is there a divine paradox? What's the way out? Where's the contingency plan? Anytime I find any rule that it's kind of like an automatic response that I know about myself, so I'm willing to keep it. I'm willing to allow myself to have that particular thing, but I do examine it. I do examine it. Is there a way out? If this is true, is there a way that it's not true? Is there a loophole? Is there some way that I'm always asking myself that kind of thing. Is there a way that I could avoid getting pinned down? But then sometimes very rigid, non-negotiable adherence to certain things is just that. And I'm totally willing to keep it. Certain things, on certain points, there will be a non-negotiable inflexibility. Oh, I was just about to end this live stream, and then here, but I'm going to say this too, because it does actually bring me to this point exactly. And then I was going to talk about this one too. What time is it? Damn, gotta go get Calico. What time is it? Oh, okay. I think I have time. So there's a while ago. Oh man, I really have a lot to say. I could keep talking for about 6 more hours. I was going to talk briefly. Oh God, this isn't brief. It isn't brief. I was going to talk about how you can travel on one line not get sidetracked. Somebody told me not to get sidetracked. My twin told me not to get sidetracked years ago. And in that time, I really don't think I have gotten sidetracked. I haven't gotten sidetracked. I haven't seen him in about 6 years, or talked to him either. They like vanished. But personally, he told me not to get sidetracked, and then I haven't seen him for 6 years. But there's a way that what seems, this is why I bring it up, because it seems like I go off in all of these things. But really what I'm doing, I'll use this example for something different too, this diagram. Let's say I'm here and what I want to do is unite these opposites. And let's say, for example, that I am the light side and my twin is the dark side. Doesn't have to be that way, but whatever. Just for the sake of argument. If I can't go here directly, if I can't go directly because there's density, there's a barrier there, and there is. What I can do in order to, this is what we're using, we're doing this for real. You can not get sidetracked and really only have one goal in mind. You can just really hold this idea. I am going to unify my light side with my dark side. Yes, I am. That's what I'm going to do. And it might take me 6 years to do it. 6 is the number of the Lover's card, by the way. 6 for harmony. And it might look like I'm sidetracked as I go through this subject and this subject and this subject and this subject. And I'm going all of these things. And I pass my window with my twin. You can't see because I dropped it. I pass this. I still can't get there just yet. There's too much of a differential, too much of a bandwidth differential. So you're not going to be able to do that right away. You're going to have to go through. So one thing you can do is go to the middle way, and you can go around. That's another thing. You could either go around the exterior. You could probably, the best way to do it is you could follow a straight line down, and you could start to go, and you're going from one to another, to another, and you're gradually making like a running stitch. You ever make like a coin purse or a running stitch where you're going all the way around, and then later on you're going to cinch the entire thing? That's basically what it is. This person could be traveling to meet their partner, but they're going to have to take the very, 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 very long way around. But in the meantime, you're gathering everything so that by the time you're recoalescing, you're kind of cinching up. Like each one of these points, the sections, like it looks like each one of the little lines in each of the like pie slices represents another smaller 11 gateway. So every time I work with one other person, like I'll have a session and it'll cinch a little closer. And then the next session, that's why I said all of my sessions are sequential. They are. And then it's like, it'll be me and another person. And then we'll bring the gap together. We'll go through that, merge that. And then I'll move to the next person and we'll merge that. I'll move to the next person, we'll merge that. The ultimate goal is actually to merge the largest of the dark and the light portions. Yeah, so that's that. So I'm not actually getting sidetracked, but I am vacillating continuously, picking up all of these things, and it only looks like I'm doing everything else under the sun, but really there's only one goal in mind. And I'm really, really, really determined. And I will make my aim. I will. And it will be victory all around. I think this is the last thing I'm going to say. I think I have enough time to cover just this. So group dynamics, I'm going to go back to this for a whole other thing. But group dynamics, one thing I want to talk about in terms of the way group dynamics work, it works this way in the construct. This is a gross generalization, but in terms of verbalizing things, oh God, I was going to talk about that other thing too. Ugh. I'm so tempted to say I'm going to do another live stream tomorrow, but I always say that. And listen, there's been a tremendous amount of cancel any negative effects of this. I don't want to manifest this. I know we're in the Lion's Gate. So cancel any negative effects, anything that may have come from any negative effect that any reaction, any negative effect that may have come from anything I said, or any reaction that was any trigger that was non-helpful or took us down in any kind of a way, or any negative manifestations, etc. Cancel, clear, delete, so that I may speak freely without fear of accidentally creating something that is not of my highest choosing and that of others. Okay. Because I'm only going in the highest possible timeline. Recently there's been a tremendous amount of interference. It's another resurgence. So one of the things that's happening, oh God, I really do want to talk about that. I'm going to try to come back on here tomorrow. I think I've got some time in the morning. I think I do. When you are in a group dynamic, one of the reasons, okay. This is another one of those things where you can see it one way or you can see it the other way. It's both. It's both. I've been very frustrated that I haven't heard from my twin. A lot of people here haven't heard from their people. And it's very frustrating. In my situation, Joan of Arc was the messenger. And in this lifetime too, I've got this huge message to deliver. And I'm also supposed to be speaking for those who have been repressed, who have been unheard, unlistened to. I've got this massive global verbal delivery, this quantity of information that is supposed to come out. So there's a sharing of qualities at a certain degree when you come in during the in the energetic construct. We did this on purpose in order to maximize the amount of a certain quantity of a certain quality. It needed to so far exceed average that it would be undeniable, so magnetic, so undeniable that it would galvanize everybody's attention. We had to do it that way. It had to be, Joan of Arc had to be a being, a manufactured being that was really a group of beings, but it had to come down in one physical form that would be so unusual and so striking and so undeniable, energetically powerful, that she would be listened to, because we were trying for women's equality, really the freedom of humanity. There's a goal here, and it has to be absolutely solid. So all of these beings contribute. You go down in a group, and what happens is that you're trying to maximize a quantity of there's only so much you can carry in a physical form. There's only so much you can carry in a group, even a group of a certain number of people, beings. So if you're opposite someone, if your twin is remaining silent, what it does with that particular quality is it makes it much stronger over here. So if, for example, you are silent and you're having a difficult time speaking, in one way, it's a gift. If I'm the messenger I'm trying to speak for other people who have been repressed. There's a lot of, let's say, this is the messenger side. This partner is silent, or let's say they've ceased contact. They've no more contact. We're not going to talk to you anymore. And let's say everybody else in the group, we're not going to give you anything either. We're going to block you. We're going to block you over here. It's like, okay, this is supposed to be, I forgot to mention this. This is supposed to be like one of those long magician balloons. It's a long balloon, and if you close off this end, you pinch off and you go into compression. Oh God, I really do want to talk about public fame. Damn it. You go off into density so nothing's moving, so you're pinched off and you get tighter, 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 tighter. What the effect that has on your opposite is that this one has no choice but to go into expansion, right? If you've got a balloon, as a long balloon, and you close off one, you pinch off one end, and you compress it so that it forces all the energy into the other direction. So this side that needs a voice, a larger voice, you'd come down as an advocate. You pinch off. You're not going to get any noise out of this side. This is going to be a silent partner. But in its way, it's frustrating as hell, but in its way, it's very supportive of this person's job. And if you're in a twin flame dynamic, you do know that. It's frustrating. I do want to hear back from you. That's why we use telepathy. So it's not like there's a secret malevolent agenda. It's all the same agenda. We're trying to get the voiceless to have a voice. So we use telepathy because it's a silent form of communication. So maximize that by the number of people in the group who also are not speaking. Or what's really happening is that a lot of them are speaking behind the scenes. I'm just not aware of it. But I was carrying the child population, which had to be kept. Everything, as long as I'm still carrying the child population, I've been frustrated to be excluded for sure. But I am aware that they did this for my own protection. As much as I was fried, and in the Joan lifetime, it wasn't for my own protection. In the Joan lifetime, on that lower strata, it was very much because I was imprisoned because, because of so many reasons. I won't even go into it because I do have to actually go get my daughter. But there's also, because I wanted to, at some point I'm going to talk about Disney and the way separating the light and the dark works. Because the whole Disney Corporation, there's a whole idea of MK Ultra being evil. And yeah, I'm not arguing, and I'm not saying, oh, go MK Ultra. I'm just saying that there's a mechanism by which it happens because, like, for example, when you go to a Disney theme park, there's all this stuff that happens backstage, and you hear about all the stuff in Hollywood and the way the child stars are treated, and there's all of this really, really dark stuff that happened, or all of the business, like the adult stuff happens. You never see it in the parks. In the parks, everything is light, and on the surface, it's all fantasy, imagination, glowingly happy, happiest place on earth. It's not that we're lying to children. I really want to make sure, is there darkness there too? Yes. But that's because any organization that's trying to do this job that emerged when it was a time of extreme duality, the darkness has to go somewhere. The best thing you can do is protect the children and keep at least a portion of it spotless. You're trying to get as bright a light as possible so that it attracts and you have someplace to go. You don't want to get stuck in the darkness. We're trying to get light to go into the darkness and transmute what is transmutable. But we had to put, like, if the light is going to be concentrated, you can't pull on just one end of a rubber band in a place of duality. The darkness has to go someplace. So you're going to be met. You're going to have an equal degree automatically. And it's not, I'm not trying to excuse it. It's just the way the realm works. It's just the way the realm works. You have to look at the Catholic Church. I'm really not saying that this is great and we should continue. No, 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 no. But the way the Catholic Church or the Disney Corporation or any one of these places which has extreme light and dark in it, it's very easy to say something like, well, I believed you and I was raised this way and I believed that you were good and I put all my trust in this organization, and it was you look behind the curtain and it was really bad. There was really MK Ultra going on. And there was really all of this pedophilia in the church or whatever, corruption in the government. There was really that going on. It's really not all. That's true. That's just part of spiritual maturity is to realize that there is a dark side as well. And part of spiritual maturity is also to realize that, I say this all the time, I think it's going to be my quote from this life. My Joan of Arc was quoted quite a bit. It shows up in memes. People send them to me. I was born to do this. I was born to do this too. One moment. I know you're still waiting for your food. This poor dog. I think my my quote from this lifetime, if I get to pick it, is going to be. I don't know. I'll figure out a way to phrase it. Anything you meet, whatever you meet, you either meet because you are either going to be a match to it, meaning if you meet something that terrifies you, it's because you have a low vibrational frequency. I'll find some way to condense this into something a little pithy that you could put on a meme. You're either a match to it or you're a match for it. If you're a match to it, it's because you were equally fearful. And if you're a match, or if you're not equally fearful, then you're a match for it. But either way, that's in your control. Yeah. All right. That's a good place to end it. I'm going to go feed this poor dog and go get my daughter. And tomorrow, if you can make a donation to my PayPal account, things really have been extremely spare, with the exception of some people did donate yesterday, thank God, because I got the dog food that I left in the car. The dog food and paper towels, because, man, it's been lean. Like I only had $3 yesterday, and I go weeks at a time living on 0 point. Shit, I was going to talk about manifesting from 0 point. I'm going to have to. I have to do another one tomorrow. I just have to do another one tomorrow. I would do it. I would keep going. If I didn't have to, I would just keep going. All right. If this benefits you, if you haven't made a donation, if you are able to make a donation, please. I could really, really use it. Right now, my car's not even insured. And that's bad. I need to find a place to live. Yeah. Things are lean here. Cancel, clear, delete. Because I'm also rolling in it. Like there's abundance, but it's easier to sometimes to manifest. It's a muscle to manifest from a place of 0 point. You know why? Because you're not looking at an external circumstance. There is actually, I have to give a whole talk about that, about how it's actually, in a way, there's a place in the development where you can actually manifest easier when you have nothing. You know why? Because you're not looking backwards and you're not looking at the material. You have to go forward into faith, and there's actually a way that you can turn it around easier. It's faster that way from a certain level of development. It depends on what strata you're in. Then later on, you're able to have stuff and still have instant manifestation. It just depends on what strata is. Okay, I love you extra, extra, extra. I do. I love you so much. Okay, bye. I'll talk to you later.